Welcome, everyone. Dana Louise Williams here. I am very, very excited to have Anita Moorjani here with us today. And Anita is world famous for an adventure that she had in 2006. And my passion is to help as many people know about Anita's journey as possible. And I know that in my community, I have a large community of followers that are, actively seeking to improve their lives and to have more love in their lives. And this experience that Anita had, I would love to, first of all, thank you for being with us today, and ask you if we can have like a two-part conversation, a conversation about your first book, Dying to Be Me, and then roll into the next part of the conversation about your newest book, called What If This Is Heaven?
That's wonderful. Thank you. And this is Dying to Be Me, my first book for
Oh, can
anyone
you
who hasn't.
move your book over just a little bit? There we go. I want everybody to see it because they're going to run out and get a copy today, hopefully. Thank you. That's great. Thanks, Anita. So, I know you've told this story so many times, but it is such an amazing adventure that you had. Can you tell us about what happened, leading up to 2006?
So I was diagnosed with cancer in April of 2002. It was lymphoma. And over a period of 4 years, my health deteriorated. And I did notice that from the time I was diagnosed was when it started to deteriorate. Until then, I had a lump on my collarbone, but other than that, I felt completely fine. But once I got the diagnosis, I just developed this incredible fear of having cancer in my body. And I had watched two people die of cancer. And so immediately I thought it was a death sentence. And so I started to fight this cancer with everything I had. But instead of beating it, it just continued to get worse and worse and worse. And so by the end of, by around the fourth year that I was dealing with it, by this point, the cancer had spread. It had metastasized, and so the lymphoma had spread, and I had tumors, some of them the size of lemons, from the base of my skull, all around my neck, under my arms, in my chest, and all the way down to my abdomen. I had open skin lesions where toxins were weeping out of my skin. My lungs were filled with fluid. My muscles had completely deteriorated because my body stopped absorbing nutrition. So I weighed about 80, 85 pounds, and I couldn't even hold my head up. Even my neck didn't have the strength to hold my head up. So my head was always hanging down like that. And I couldn't walk because my legs couldn't hold my weight up. So I was in a wheelchair or I was lying down. But because my lungs were filled with fluid, I couldn't even lie flat because then I would choke on my own fluid. And I was connected to an oxygen tank because I couldn't breathe without the help of pressured oxygen. And I was in a tremendous amount of tremendous discomfort, because being awake was uncomfortable. Sleeping was hard because of the fluid in my lungs and the breathing. And I was in so much pain. And on February the 2nd, 2006, I went into a coma because my organs shut down, and the doctors told my family that these were my final hours and I was now dying. And they told my family that I was not going to come out of the coma. Mm-hmm. And what they didn't realize, what nobody realized, was that even though my physical body was in a coma, my physical eyes were closed, I was actually aware of everything that was happening around me. And even though my eyes were closed, it was like I could see them all, but it was different from physical sight, because with physical sight, we use our eyes. And so we have to look in the direction of what we want to see. Mm. But it felt like I was no longer viewing from my body. It felt like my true self had expanded and come out beyond my body, and I had 360-degree peripheral vision, and I could even see my body lying there on the hospital bed. And I felt amazing. I just felt so incredible, so peaceful, so calm, and all the pain was gone and the fear was gone. And I felt so, just so full of love. And love is the only word I can think of to describe it. But to me, the absence of fear is love. And that's what I felt like. All that fear was just gone. And there was no more pain. And I felt light and I felt free. And I felt also just magnificent and powerful. And looking at that body, physical body, lying on that bed, I felt that was so small and insignificant compared to how I was feeling now. And I was in a coma for about 30 hours where I experienced a lot of different things, which I explain in the book, Dying to Be Me. But amongst all the different things I experienced, which included a visitation from my deceased father. My father had passed away 10 years prior, and I felt that he was there to greet me and to help me with the transition. My best friend, who had died of cancer 2 years prior, I felt that she was there to help me. But some of the key things I felt was I realized that there was no judgment in that realm. And that's something that a lot of people give me a lot of pushback about, but I can't change what I experienced. There was no judgment. There was only unconditional or divine love and empathy. And I understood that even for all the things that I had done wrong, or even where I had hurt other people, I had done it out of my own pain or my own ignorance. I wasn't judged for it. I understood why I had done what I had done. I understood the whole trajectory of my life to the point where I understood why I had cancer. I understood how every choice and every decision that I had made in my life led up to that point of me lying in the hospital bed dying. And I reached a point where I felt my father was telling me that that this is as far as you can go. If you go any further, you won't be able to turn back. No part of me wanted to turn back because it was just so amazing in that realm. Even though I remember feeling that I was connected with everyone, I understood that we're all connected. It's like we're all facets of the same consciousness. I understood why I got cancer. I could feel everything that my family was feeling. My family was surrounding my physical body because they thought I was dying. My husband was there leaning over my body by my bedside and holding my hand, and he was distraught. My mother was distraught. My brother had flown in from India because he had just been told, and this was happening to me in a hospital in Hong Kong. And I was aware of all of this going on. But yet, I didn't feel the need to come back because I felt my body was so sick. I was suffering. My family was suffering. I felt it would just be more suffering for them if I came back. And I wanted to stay in the other realm. But then it was like I started to understand that now that I knew the truth of who I really was, that if I chose to come back, my body would heal very, very quickly. And I felt as though my father was telling me that it wasn't my time and that I still had work to do on this side. And there were some things waiting for me that I had not yet experienced. And as I started to understand that, I made the decision to come back. And as soon as I made the decision, I felt my father and my best friend tell me, now that you know the truth, go back and live your life fearlessly. And that's when I started to come out of the coma. And when I came out of the coma, I was delirious. It was like I had one foot on each side. And I was saying to my family, because they were all around me, and I said to them, I just said to them, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. You can tell the doctors, they can take the tubes out. I'm going to be fine. Now, I was still extremely weak. I still weighed 80 to 85 pounds, and I still looked very sick to anyone looking at me, and I was connected to all the machines and the tubes and everything. And I was delirious, and I was just saying, Dad is here. Dad is here. He told me I'm going to be fine. I'm not going to die. I'm here. So, of course, my family thought I was just delirious, and they called the doctor. The doctor came in, and I recognized the doctor by name, even though he was just the doctor on duty who'd been just looking after me from that morning. I'd never seen him before I went into the coma. So I just said to him, "Good afternoon, Dr. Chan." And he said, "How do you know my name?" And I said, "But you were here this morning, and you were putting these needles into my veins and removing fluid from my lungs." And he said, "But you were in a coma while I was doing that. There's no way you could have known that." And then I sort of went, I was, because I was just delirious. I had got this world and the other world completely mixed up. It was all one. And he basically told my family before he left the room, he just said, "She's still critical, and it's normal for patients to come in and out of consciousness, but she's still critical." And so he left the room. And then I just said to my family that, isn't he the doctor that said I won't even make it through the night, that these are my final hours? And my husband said, "How did you even hear that?" He didn't say that in the room. He said that outside the room, down the hallway. And I said, "I don't know." And it was like my body had expanded, and I had seen and heard so much more. Sorry, not my body, but my consciousness had come out of my body and had expanded. It didn't feel like it had floated above. It felt like it had expanded to not just fill the room, but outside the room and beyond, to the point where I was aware of other beings like my deceased father and so on. But what subsequently happened was that within 4 days, my tumors shrunk by 70%. Within 5 weeks, they could find no trace of cancer, and the doctors could not explain it. But they continued to run tests. At first, I didn't want them to. I kept saying, "I know I'm going to be fine. You can see the tumors are shrinking," because they were visibly shrinking. But they kept running biopsies, which were very painful. And even though I protested, my family wanted me to do it because they felt they wanted to know that the cancer was really gone. Today, I'm really glad I went through all the tests because I have the medical records to prove it. But after 5 weeks, I had built up enough strength, physical strength, to be able to get up, walk around, and become independent again. And they let me out of the hospital to go and live my life cancer-free. And that was 10.5 years ago.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. What an incredible experience. And the inspiration that you've given others that are perhaps challenged or inspired, it's really beautiful. I have a question for you. Was there ever a sort of an inkling or a knowing as you were growing up that your life was going to take an amazing turn on some level? Was there a sparkling of that anywhere at all for you?
In a weird way, there was. From the time I was very young, I knew I was different. I knew I was different, but I didn't understand why. And I can't even explain it, but there was something within me that kept me going, because I was bullied very badly as a child because I grew up in a culture that was not my own. I grew up in Western culture in a British school where I was the only person in the class who was not British, who was not basically white, fair-skinned and white. And as I was growing up, I stood out. I was very different from the rest of the kids. But coupled with the fact that my parents are Indian, they're Hindus, and in my culture, women are treated inferior to men. Like I live in a culture that has a lot of gender bias, where our culture is biased towards men, and women are expected to be subservient to men. As we grow up, we are taught and groomed for an arranged marriage. And all the things that I wanted to do, the dreams and aspirations I had, are considered negative qualities for women of my culture to have. I wanted a career. I wanted to travel the world. I had dreams. I wanted to be independent. I didn't want an arranged marriage. All of these things are negative traits because it makes me somebody who is going to have a problem finding a husband, and it makes me less marriageable because I had all these dreams and aspirations. And the more education you want, the less marriageable you are. So I didn't fit into my own culture, and I didn't fit into the culture of my peers at school because I was bullied very, very badly as a child, so much so and taunted that it left me pretty scarred, as any kind of childhood abuse does. And so I always had this feeling that I didn't belong with all these people in my school and in my class. I always, I was very, very, very shy, and I was afraid to show myself because of the bullying I had experienced earlier, because I never wanted to put myself in that position. You know, I hated being the last one to be picked for teams and so on. So what you do is you hide. And so I would hide. I would hide behind long hair and baggy clothes, and I made myself invisible. But yet I knew I was different. And I always had this vision or this dream that one day I will burst out of this cocoon and I will show everyone, and not by getting even or anything, because I've never had any desire to do that, but more like I will show everyone by turning into something that's like, in those days, it was more like my ideas was it's like the ugly duckling turning into the beautiful swan, or the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. And I was waiting for that day to come.
Wow. And our socially now, there's so much fear and terror being fed in the media that we're actually being bullied daily by the news. And can you talk about that, Anita, and maybe shed some light on how people can kind of touch into themselves and not be affected by that so much?
Yes, definitely. So first of all, I just want to say that it really saddens me what I see, because truly I felt I left behind that culture where, I left behind the culture that have blatant misogyny, only to come to the US to find that it's worldwide. It saddens me, a lot of things that are actually accepted, and to see people, including women, defend certain things, which I thought we were beyond that. But what I ask people to do, and what I invite us to do, is to focus inward on our own vision and on who we are. So here's what we have a tendency to do. We have a tendency to go out and try and change the world. And when we go out and try and change the world, we come from a place of reacting to what we see on the outside. So we are reacting instead of creating. So what I tell people is, don't react to the world. Don't react to the news. Instead, go and create what you want to see in the world.
Beautiful.
It's a little bit like what Gandhi said, be the change. But my version is create it. Bring out your creativity. So we are currently in reactionary mode, and the news and everything on the news, the media, they put us in reactionary mode. And when we're living from a place of fear, we're living in reaction. when we're living from a place of love or passion or joy or self-realization, where we have a vision of what we want life to be, we're living from a space of creation. So this is what I ask people to do. Switch off the news, switch off from the media, and turn in and ask yourself, what do I want in my life? What is my vision of a beautiful life? And don't worry, even if it feels selfish to you, that you want to create something that's really beautiful for you. And here's the key. We've been conditioned to believe that if I do something for myself, if the whole world out there is suffering, but I go and create a beautiful reality for myself, and I ignore everything out there, we've been conditioned to believe that I'm being selfish and I'm putting my head in the sand about what's happening out there. Actually, it's the opposite. So much of what we've taught is the opposite of what is really true, which is what I write about in my second book. It's about how, basically, if I had a subtitle for my second book, it would be How to Create Heaven in a Fear-Based World. That's what the second book is about. So what you do is, if you want to create heaven in a fear-based world, you have to create heaven for yourself first. You really do. Because if you are filled with fear and you think you're going to go out and change this fearful world, you're taking a fearful self out there with you. That's what you're bringing to everyone else.
Yes.
You first have to create heaven internally. And even if it means being selfish, even if it means recharging your batteries, even if it means finding your own joy, your own heaven, creating your own vision, getting to a very joyful place for yourself, then when you go out into the world, you don't even have to do anything. Your very presence touches other people. That's how you change the world. By bringing a joyful, loving self out into the world.
Yes. And can you speak on those that may be experiencing that kind of fear-based environment in their own family of origin? Because there's a different category when it's the news than when it's your immediate family. And I know that there's a lot of struggle for people that are wanting to wake up, and they're being ostracized by their family if they change. Can you speak on that?
Yes, in fact, that is the more challenging one, the bigger challenge than dealing with the news, because we have to live with our family members and our friends. So first of all, I want to say that when I had this near-death experience, when I came out of the coma, I felt I had changed. I'd become a different person. I couldn't go back to being the person that I used to be. And I had to take a risk of, being authentic and being who I was. And when I say take the risk, because the risk was losing people. And so here's what I would say to you. It's more important to be yourself than it is to please other people. It is much more important, because then the people who surround you are the ones who love you for who you are, not for who you're trying to be or not for who they want you to be. What I found in my own experience is that in the beginning, I did lose a few people, but after a couple of years, they came back to me. And the other thing I want to say, the other piece I want to add here, is that by being yourself, it doesn't mean you have to be mean. A lot of women are very afraid of truly being who they are, because we have been somehow conditioned, and again, I say this over and over, everything you've been taught, everything you've been conditioned is the opposite of what really works in your life. And that's what my book, What If This Is Heaven, is about. So a lot of women have been conditioned to believe that if we take care of ourselves, if we honor who we are, if we be authentic, that somehow we're being bitchy or mean. I want to tell you that you're not. The person who you are at your core, your essence, is pure love. It is pure love. Because when you were perfect. You were born, and you were your true essence when you were born. We've accumulated all this cultural conditioning after that. So when you allow your true authenticity to shine through, how can that be nasty or bitchy? It's pure love. You are a spiritual being. We all are. We came from spirit or God or essence, whatever you want to call it, and that's where we go. That's who we are inside. So we have to allow that to shine through. In order for that to shine through, we have to honor who we are as opposed to honoring what other people want us to be, because that's how we lose ourselves, is constantly trying to be what we think everybody else wants us to be. In actuality, all you need to do is be yourself, truly be yourself.
And I think the key word is that you said there, you know, that came up for me at the end was we think, you know, that, you know, we have to be who they want us to be. And by doing that, we're not even dropping down into our heart area where, you know, and there's filters here that hold all the unhealed stories of the past and the scars. And so if we just stay up here and we're constantly trying to be people pleasers so that our life smooths out, we're actually only living in part of our real estate. And you talk so beautifully about that in one of your videos that I'm going to actually post for my community, where you talk about the little flashlight shining. Can you speak? Because it feels really similar to the idea of staying in our head versus dropping down.
So what I believe is that this physical life, what it feels like is if you imagine that you are in this huge darkened room that's pitch black. It's absolutely pitch black and you can't see anything, but you've got this little flashlight in your hand, and it's just a little handheld flashlight. And all you can see is what the beam of that flashlight is shining on. So if you're shining your flashlight on this wall, and then maybe there's a picture on the wall and that's all you can see, and you're shining it over there and that's all you can see. So the only thing you can see is just one thing at a time. It's what the little beam of your flashlight is shining on. Now imagine if one day these overhead lights go on, these floodlights go on, and for the first time you realize that actually you are in this huge room, and it is so huge that you can't even see where the room ends. And the ceiling is so high you can't even see the ceiling. But in this room, there is so much stuff. There are all these shelves that are lined with so many things. The walls, when you can see the walls, whichever walls you can see, are lined with beautiful pictures and portraits and tapestries. And the shelves are lined with books and statues and objects. And some of these things are so beautiful. Some of them have colors that you've never seen before. Some of these things make you laugh, or some of them just make you feel joyful. But some of the things you look at, maybe the books or the pictures, they're quite scary and they just make you feel really fearful. And there are all these different things that live side by side. A few of these things, you recognize them because you've seen them before, because your flashlight has shone on them. But many of these things, you've never seen them before because your flashlight never shone on them. So you never even knew they existed, but there they are, right alongside the things that you knew existed. And then now let's say the lights go back off. And even though the lights are off and you're back to one flashlight, and your flashlight can only focus on one thing at a time, you're aware that there is so much more to this reality than what your flashlight is focused on. And so the flashlight is an analogy of our awareness. Our awareness can only focus on one thing at a time. But just because our awareness is focused on one thing, we seem to think that that one thing is all of reality. But actually, reality encompasses millions of different possibilities, tons of possibilities living alongside. Positive and negative live alongside each other. Joy and sadness live alongside of each other. It just depends what your awareness is focused on in that moment. So you get people saying the world is a terrible place. It's unsafe. People are awful. Be careful where you go. And they live in fear all the time. But right alongside of that, you can live in absolute joy and creativity and fun. And they all exist simultaneously. It just depends where your flashlight is focused.
And one of the things that happens for me is I get sacred acronyms. And the acronym that I have for fear is frozen energy asking to be released.
I like that.
So it's just the part of us that's saying, would you please pick up the phone? Please unfreeze this fear inside of, this awareness. And take the flashlight and go outside of the postage stamp of fear that we coexist in and co-create through, right? Because
yes,
we just if we're creating through the frozen energy, wanting something different, we're gonna get more examples of frozen energy and not trusting, and the world isn't safe. And so I love that, that we're getting to talk about this, because it's epidemic from what I see with the work that I do. And I love that. And,
thank you.
Yeah. And so let's tippy toe over to this beautiful book. And could you tell us about the significance of the color orange?
Sure. So orange is actually my favorite color. And I can tell you both the significance of the orange and the rose, as well as how I came up with the title of the book as well. So orange is my favorite color. And as you probably know, Wayne Dyer discovered my original story of the near-death experience on the internet. I didn't set out to write a book, but I had written my story as a blog on the internet, and it went viral. And Wayne Dyer discovered it. Somebody brought it to his attention, and he contacted Hay House, his publishers, and told them to track me down, because he wanted me to write a book, which he said he would write the foreword and he would promote. So it took them 5 months to find me, because I didn't even put my full name on the blog, and I was living in Hong Kong at the time. And so they found me, and so I received this beautiful email from them to say that Wayne Dyer has discovered your story and we invite you to write a book. And I was like, I really was so... I started crying when I saw that email, because it just kind of made me realize that everything that I had felt in the other realm, that the reason I had to come back and I just had to be myself and be authentic and my life would unfold, I saw it all happening. So Wayne invited me to travel on the road with him. So for 4 years, we actually toured together. My husband and Wayne and his beautiful assistant manager, booking manager, and 1 or 2 of his daughters at every point in time was with us. And we would travel all over the US and Australia and England. And so we spoke in many places together. And orange has always been my favorite color. And he used to tease me about the color orange, because my phone case was always orange. I always had orange purses. And he would always have an orange, the fruit orange, on stage with him, because he always shared this analogy that when you squeeze an orange, you get orange juice. So you don't get apple juice, you always get orange juice. But when you squeeze a person, which means when you stress somebody out, what comes out is what's inside of them. So if anger comes out, it's not the fault of the person who squeezed them, it's what's inside that person. So he always gave that analogy, and he says it more elegantly than I just did, but he always had an orange on stage with him. As you know, Wayne passed away last year, and that was a shock to me. But on the day he passed away, before I even knew he passed away, we had just come back from a tour in Australia, and I was like literally still recovering from jet lag. And 4 days after coming back from Australia, he'd gone back to his home in Maui. My husband and I had come to our home in California. And some friends came over for lunch. Jennifer McLean, you may know her.
Yes.
And yeah, so she came over for lunch, and she brought me this beautiful bouquet of orange roses. And she said to me, and they were beautiful. So I said, wow, thank you. These are beautiful. So she said, you know, I was in the flower store and I was reaching for the red roses, but there was this strong male voice. It's obviously someone who knows you in the other realm who kept saying, get her the orange ones, get the orange ones. And I said, really? And she goes, yeah, what's with the orange? And who do you know on the other side who would do that? And I said, I can't think of anyone who would have done that. And I said, well, orange is my favorite color, but I can't figure who would have done that. So I just thought, gosh, I hope somebody hasn't passed away recently. And then I dismissed it. And we started to have lunch. And then my phone rang. And it was Maya, Wayne's booking manager, and who's become a really good friend of mine. And so when I answered the phone, I heard her voice and she was crying and she said, it's Wayne. He left this morning. And wow, I was just so stunned to hear it. And it took me a few minutes to connect the dots and realize, wow, that was him. and then the other weird thing is that the very last post on his Facebook page before he died was a photograph of an orange with that analogy. Like that was an analogy he used on stage, but an explanation, his story on if you squeeze an orange, that's what's inside, was the very last post on his Facebook page before he passed away. And so my new book is dedicated to Wayne, hence the orange rose on the book cover. And I speak about this story as the afterword. But also the reason for the title is because when I looked back over the last 10 years of my life, so even though I had started writing the book, I hadn't decided yet what I was going to call it. But as I looked back over the last 10 years of my life, I realized it was incredibly different from my life prior to the coma. My life prior was the person who got cancer. It was the person who lived in fear, the person who lived in self-loathing, self-hatred, self-criticism, the person who was a people pleaser. My life was filled with fear. And that's what led to me getting the cancer. I was the person who had cancer. My life after coming out of the coma, I have not felt the fear anymore. Again, I have felt light. I have felt free. I have felt that I'm able to do whatever I want every day because I know this is the most important thing. The most important thing you can do is just be who you are, shine your light brightly. And I have just stuck with that. And I have just been so fortunate. I've never worried about my health. I've never worried about money. And I just focus on what I feel I have come back to do. And so I looked back on my life and I thought, this feels like heaven. And I started to think, maybe when I died, I thought I came back. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I'm still dead and I'm experiencing heaven because it doesn't get better than this. You get to do everything you do. You feel the lightness, you feel the freedom, and I get to live anywhere in the world I want to because all my work is done online. And I thought, maybe this is what it feels like to be in heaven. Hence the book title, What If This Is Heaven?
Yes, and the analogy of what you went through when you were in transition from spirit and you had that expanded awareness of everything. It's kind of like what you just said about, you can work anywhere in the world because you're doing your work online. It's kind of like you can be everywhere you need to be. Here in Earth School, but you can still be in heaven and expand your message everywhere like you're doing. And it feels like, this can really be heaven.
It really can. And when you are in heaven, when you are without your physical body, you are everywhere at once. And we're recreating that with the internet.
Well, yes. And think about it right now. you know, we're having this exchange, and we're nowhere near each other, and this message is going to go through the airwaves out, you know, around the world. And yes, like I love that. I love that analogy, so that we can just know that by putting ourselves first and being in our truth, we can create healing in our lives. And, you know, I see the word health in two different spellings. I see it spelled Hellth, which is
Yes.
the old way, or
Yes.
Health. And
Yes.
that Health is heaven. When we're being who we are, we can be, our energy can be everywhere.
It so can. And also, speaking of health, in this new book, I do talk a lot about having a new paradigm for health, because I believe that our so-called healthcare system is more focused on our illness than on our health. They're so focused on looking for illness that they have no idea what it means to be healthy. We don't even know how to promote health or what health really means. Our healthcare system teaches us how to look for illness. They don't teach us how to be healthy. That's another thing that our flashlight is focused on. It's focused on illness. It's not focused on health. We need to change that shift of that flashlight. I think that if we spent as many hours and the same amount of money, the trillions of dollars that we spend on cancer awareness and drugs and cancer research, if we spent that same amount of money, the same focus, the same awareness, the same amount of advertising on what it means to be happy, healthy, whole, we would see a total reduction, if not complete elimination of cancer.
I believe that too. And look at, you know, the word illness. The root word of illness is ill. The root word of illusion is also ill. And it's an illusion that we are faulty, or you know, we're always looking for the imperfections, and the imperfections are leading us to what's underneath that's always there for us.
Yeah, and that's also a myth, the fact that we are broken, that we're imperfect, that we need fixing. And that's another thing I address, is that in this book, is that I don't work on the premise that people are broken. We all think that we need to attend more workshops and do more work on ourselves and to buy more books. I mean, don't even buy my book if you truly get this, because my point is that you're not broken. But the fact that you think you are is actually the problem. The fact that you are brought up to believe that you need to be fixed, that there's something wrong with you, you need to change, you need to conform, you need to fix yourself. That is the problem, because you're born perfect. And somehow along the way, you've lost that, you've forgotten that, because society, culture has conditioned it out of you.
That's so true. Anita, I know you're a very busy lady with all of your wonderful work that you're doing, and I just noticed that we're on target here with all the first. Maybe we'll do another interview down the road for my community, but I really want to honor your time and thank you so much. So if you have one thing to say to everybody to wrap this call up, how would you want to do that?
I would like to tell everyone to stop taking life so seriously. Everybody has forgotten to have fun. It doesn't matter whether they're part of the government. I mean, especially the politicians. Oh my God. Stop taking yourself seriously, everybody. Our education system makes us too serious. Our government makes us too serious. Our healthcare system makes us too serious. Have fun, lighten up, enjoy life, hang out with people you love and who love you. Life is supposed to be fun. Find your joy. If all else fails, eat chocolate and enjoy it.
I love that. Thank you so much, Anita.
You're very, very
I'm gonna
welcome.
go have some chocolate.
Yes.
Okay. All the best of luck with everything else that you're creating, and thank you so much for all that you do.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very, very much. This was a pleasure.
It was an absolute pleasure. Bye for now, Anita.